Welcome to this video series on how to structure your warehouse in Infoplus. Infoplus provides a variety of options and tools to organize your warehouse. To begin, you need to have a warehouse record in Infoplus. One will already be created for you. Then you need to create the necessary areas of your warehouse. Infoplus supports these areas in a warehouse: buildings, zones, aisles, bays, and levels. You can use any or all of these layers. For a small warehouse, you might only want to organize locations by aisle and rack and not by building or zone. But for a large warehouse, you might have multiple buildings with several zones and aisles. And you could have anything in between. In this video series, we'll use this warehouse as our example. This is the same warehouse used to create your test site. Note that a full resolution version of this diagram is available in the knowledge base. Here's a tip. Before structuring your warehouse in Infoplus, start with a predefined plan of your warehouse layout, like this diagram. Consider the following. Do you have different buildings? Do you have a need for climate control or refrigeration? What areas do you want to define? How many staging areas do you need? What type of picking methodologies do you want to use? Those are just a few examples of what to consider. You can always modify your warehouse structure in Infoplus, but having a clear plan from the start will help things go more smoothly. Let's review this warehouse in more detail to determine how we would structure it in Infoplus. This warehouse is made up of one building. Note that one warehouse can have multiple buildings, but you can also have multiple warehouses in Infoplus. To decide whether you need multiple buildings or multiple warehouses, consider where shipping originates. Wherever shipping originates, that is a warehouse. For example, let's say you have two separate structures that hold product. If you ship out of each structure, each one should be its own warehouse. But if you only ship out of one of the structures, you could designate both buildings as part of one warehouse. Again, our warehouse only contains one building. How many zones are there? Whether to use zones and how many to create just depends on how you want to break out the functional areas of your warehouse. We can see sections in this warehouse for inbound receiving, outbound shipping, a cold room, an area where product is brought forward into pick locations, and several storage areas. You can create as many zones as you'd like in Infoplus, but only the zones that contain locations will be referenced by Infoplus for material handling. For example, you can direct material handling by grouping pick work by zone. This is done during fulfillment of orders. Other zones you create in Infoplus that don't contain locations can still be referenced by looking at the zone table in Infoplus. You may want to create these simply to represent the complete structure of your warehouse. There are 9 aisles in our warehouse diagram: 101 through 105, 201 through 203, and 301. An aisle can have locations on both sides, like you see with aisle 101, or just on one side, like aisle 105. And within those aisles are levels. Levels represent vertical sections. Here's an example of what might be a live representation of one of the aisles. There are locations on both sides, and there are 3 levels. Some aisles may also have bays. A bay typically represents the area between crossbars in an aisle. For example, you might organize the area shown here as a bay. Again, how you organize your warehouse is completely up to you. To represent each building, zone, and aisle in Infoplus, you need to create a record for each. You will not create records for levels and bays. You can specify this type of organization when creating the actual locations. Looking ahead for a minute, when you eventually create the specific locations in Infoplus where you will place product, you will give each location an address. You can use areas of your warehouse in your location addresses. For example, if you want location labels to indicate the building number, zone, and aisle for the location, it might look something like this. This indicates that the location is in Building 1, the forward zone, represented by the F, aisle 201, and location number 1. You can create location addresses with as much or as little detail as needed. The point is that you can include areas of your warehouse in location address labels. Let's look at warehouse setup in Infoplus. Warehouse setup occurs through warehouse operations. From there, I'll click on the Warehouse Setup app. Tables, processes, and reports regarding warehouse setup display. These all display in alphabetical order. You'll use tables to create the areas in your warehouse. Your warehouse record will already be created for you, and you can see that record in the warehouse table. In this example, we have 2 warehouses already created. And one note, a quick way to get to where you need to be in Infoplus is to use the dot on your keyboard. Then you can search through the quick actions or begin typing them to quickly jump to the table, process, or report that you want to access. So again, in this example, we have 2 warehouses, but we will be working with Test Warehouse 1. Here's some basic information about our warehouse. If you need to make any edits to your warehouse, you can click the Actions menu and select Edit. As you create areas in your warehouse, you'll see them display in these tabs at the bottom of the warehouse record. And that's what we'll do next in this video series. We need to create the necessary areas of the warehouse: buildings, zones, and aisles. So continue through this video series for step-by-step instructions on creating those areas.